while ago, I had one of those evenings that might look boring from the outside. I was sitting at my home, at my desk after a full workday, and on my screen were lesson plans and exercises, small little coding challenges for my students. Because besides my regular job, I teach, I mentor, and I do that in my spare time. And I remember staring at those exercises and thinking, what am I doing? I was investing my precious time, my precious evening, my resources. I was preparing for teaching technology and programming, and then the thought hit me, isn't AI making all these things meaningless? Now here's the irony. In my professional life, I'm an AI expert. I spend my days helping developers integrate AI in their workflows. I've watched these tools evolve from clumsy autocomplete to genuinely powerful systems. I've seen what they can do because I use them every single day. And it was precisely because of this that the question hit me so hard. I wasn't just hearing programming is dead. I was watching it happen in my own every editor. Entire functions, entire features generated from a few sentences of descriptions. And for the first time in decades, I caught myself wondering, is the thing that I love, the thing that I teach, about to become irrelevant? The question hurt more than I expected because programming isn't just my job. It's been part of my identity for most of my life. And teaching is really part of my purpose. So that night, instead of continuing writing another exercise, my thoughts drifted back to the very beginning, back to my first computer, to the moment I fell in love with programming in the first place. In 1987, when I was a teenager, this image is a little bit later, but I think you get the point, I got my first computer, and for me it was a Commodore C128. By today's standards, absolutely useless. No memory, no fancy graphics, and of course no internet. I mean, that's more than 40 years in the past. And yet it completely changed my life. I spent hours, literally hours, typing code from computer magazines, line by line, page by page, and almost all of the time, it didn't work. One missing character, one typo, and nothing happened. But when it did work, when a tiny little game appeared on the screen, maybe just a simple pattern on the screen, it felt like magic. I remember the first time I wrote a nested loop, just loops that drew some patterns on the screen, and I was so proud of that program. I showed it to everyone, my parents, my grandparents, anyone who would take a look. And at some point, I even went to an electronics store around the corner. For the locals, it was the Hartlauer in the old Pluskauf. I don't know if you can remember it. And they sold Commodore computers there. And the salespeople had no idea how to sell them. So I typed my little program into some of the computers that they had on display, and patterns emerged. Lines appeared, and they were impressed. And the next parents who walked into the store, they said, you see, programming is the future. If you want your kids to be part of the future, you should definitely buy one of those machines. For me, programming felt a lot like music back then. I imagined something in my head, and then I translated it into code. As an absolute beginner, computer magazines were my sheet music, and the pixels they drew on the screen were my sound. At that age, programming for me wasn't about technology, it was about expression and experience, about turning ideas into something real. And at that point, I absolutely knew this isn't just the thing that I enjoy. This is something that I want to do every day for the rest of my life. Now fast forward to today. Everywhere I go, I hear the same sentence. Programming is dead. People say it with excitement. They say it with relief, sometimes even with pride. AI writes the code now. You just describe what you want and it's done. And technically, they are not wrong. But here's the strange part. The problem is not that AI can write better code than we can. The problem is that AI takes away the part that many of us fell in love with. I see this with experienced developers all the time. People who didn't choose this as a career path for prestige, but because they simply love building things with code. And suddenly they ask themselves, if the machine does this part better than I do, what's left for me? This resistance isn't fear of technology, it's grief. Imagine a carpenter, somebody who loves working with wood, the smell, the resistance of the material, the feeling of shaping something with your own hands. And now imagine a robot that can do the same work, faster, more precise, without breaks, day and night. Of course, the carpenter could learn how to program a robot, but something important would be gone. Not the result, the process. That's exactly what many developers are struggling right now. And as a teacher, that is terrifying. Because if the machine can generate entire systems, what exactly am I preparing my students for? Am I training them for a craft that won't exist in the same way by the time they graduate? On that evening, when I was questioning what I should teach, I realized a contradiction. I work with AI every day, and in fact, personally, I don't feel fear or grief. I have more fun developing software than I've had in many years. And that surprised me, because according to the headlines, I was supposed to feel obsolete. According to the narrative, I was supposed to feel replaced. But that's not what I feel when I open my editor and I work with AI. I feel powerful. Not because AI is doing the work for me, but because suddenly the distance between idea and reality has drastically shortened. My feeling with AI reminds me of my past. When I was a teenager, a few lines of code were enough to create something that amazed me. Not because the code was perfect, but because I had made something happen. And for the first time, I felt what psychologists call self-efficacy. The feeling that my ideas can change reality. And now, decades later, working side by side with AI every single day, I recognize that feeling again. I have an idea in my mind, and AI helps me bringing it to life faster, on a bigger scale, with fewer barriers. That's when I realized something important. I was never in love primarily with coding. I was in love with developing things, with building mental models, with shaping ideas, with turning vague thoughts into something real and usable. Code was just a tool. And that's when the sentence finally clicked. I'm not just a coder, I'm a developer. Programming languages were always just abstractions. They freed me from thinking about registers and memory addresses and machine code. AI is just another abstraction layer, a powerful one, granted, but still just a tool. It doesn't replace what I do. It changes the level at which I do it. It doesn't shrink my role. It, in fact, expands it. The goals I aim for are bigger now. The ideas I can explore are more ambitious. AI doesn't take away my creativity. It simply removes friction. But that still leaves the original pain. Because, you know, I love coding. I genuinely love it. The mental challenge of describing something with with limited means, precise syntax, precise semantics. I don't want to lose that. So what's happening with coding? I don't think coding is going to disappear. We still play chess. Although machines beat us every single time. We still run, we still cycle, we still sail, even though engines are faster and more efficient. Efficiency was never the point, experience was. Only because something is no longer efficient, the most efficient path, it doesn't make it worthless. Coding will stay, not because it's the fastest way to build software, but because it's a powerful way to train a certain kind of thinking. Coding teaches precision, logic, patience. It teaches you what it feels when the computer does exactly what you told it to do. Maybe one day, we'll even start valuing software that was handmade because it is not efficient. It's intentional. And there's another reason coding still matters. AI makes mistakes. It will make few of them over time, granted, but it won't make zero. And the last few percentages between almost correct and actually correct are expensive and valuable. That's where people who truly understand code become incredibly valuable. Not to write everything, but to know what is wrong, to debug, to verify, to close the gap. Now here's the part that took me longer to see. I've been talking about programmers, developers, my world. But this story isn't just about programming. Programming is just the first frontier. The first profession where AI became good enough to challenge what we thought makes us valuable. We are the canary in the coal mine, and nowadays, the coal mine is everywhere. Think about it. What I described, this grief, this identity crisis, this question of what's left for me, designers are asking it now. Writers are asking it, translators, lawyers, accountants, architects, even doctors are asking it. Because AI doesn't just write code, it writes contracts. It generates images, it drafts legal briefs, it analyzes X-rays. And in every single one of those fields, people are going through the same emotional journey that I went through. First, denial. AI can't do that. Then fear. Wait, maybe it can? Then grief. But I love doing that. And finally, hopefully, a kind of redefinition. What was I actually in love with? And how do I keep doing that? The carpenter I mentioned earlier, that's not just a metaphor for programmers. That's every knowledge worker watching AI getting better at their thing that kept them, that they spent mastering years. But here's what I've learned from being in the front line. The answer is not to fight the tool. The answer is to find the layer above it. For me, that layer was, I'm not just a coder, I'm a developer. For a designer, it might be, I'm not a pixel pusher, I'm a visual thinker. For a writer, it is, I'm not a sentence crafter, I'm a storyteller. And for a doctor, I'm not a diagnosis machine, but I'm a healer who understands context, fear, and hope. Every profession will have to find its own version of that sentence, and that's uncomfortable because it forces us to ask, what is the essence of what we do? What part of my work is irreplaceable? Maybe not just because the machine can't do it, but because it shouldn't. Programming got there first, but the rest of the world will follow. This brings me to teaching. Because if my identity as a developer has changed, then what I pass on has to change too. When my identity as a developer changes, what I teach has to change with it. So, does it still make sense to learn coding without AI? Yes, absolutely. We teach so many things, not because everyone will turn pro, but because they shape how we think. Not everybody who writes an essay will become a professional writer. Not everybody who learns calculus will become a mathematician, and not everybody who sings in a choir will earn money by singing. And not everybody who learns programming needs to become a professional software engineer. Coding can be part of a general education, like math, like language, like music, because it builds a certain kind of thinking. But how we teach it must change. Because with AI, natural language becomes a programming interface. And this is the thesis that I want you to remember from this talk. The new programming language is clarity. For years, programming was about translating ideas into syntax, but syntax is no longer the bottleneck. Clarity is the new bottleneck. Can you describe what you want? Can you provide examples? Can you set constraints? Can you explain what good looks to you? Can you test whether the result matches the intent? Communication becomes a technical skill. Diagrams matter, examples matter, shared understandings matter. And that changes what learning programming means in 2026. It's not only can you write code, it's also can you express intent so that an AI can execute what you want. And there's the thing, that's not just true for programming. When a lawyer uses AI, clarity matters. When a designer prompts an image generator, clarity matters. When a manager delegates tasks to AI agents, clarity matters. The skill of turning a fuzzy idea into a precise specification that used to be programmer superpowers. But now it's becoming a universal requirement. So here's where I landed after that evening on my desk. I didn't stop teaching, but I stopped thinking myself of somebody who teaches syntax. I teach agency. I teach clarity and the craft turning ideas into reality across abstraction layers. I still love coding. I genuinely love it. But I no longer define my entire professional life, my entire professional identity with it. Because the center has moved, and that's okay. Because I'm not just a coder, I'm a developer. And my new programming language is clarity. Thank you.